Hello, welcome to an episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, Alan Wyma, and I forgot to change my shirt, so today's a little bit more casual than normal. So today we have Alek on. Hello, Alek. How are you?
Hey, Alan. I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm just fine. So we were talking before the show about a couple of things. So there's two things we wanted to talk about. Maybe to kind of give a little bit more context of who you are. You are the CPTO, Chief Product and Technology Officer. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and then you said you just found that out also, which is a interesting, weird story.
Yeah. So for the first few years of Done, so I'm also one of the co-founders. I was the chief technical officer, the CTO, and my partner Malin was the CEO. But since nowadays I do actually more product than tech, it's good to be able to indicate to people outside of tech that I do product and when speaking to investors and things like that. So yeah, product and tech at Done.
Yeah, how does it actually get divided up? I mean, are you spending time coding, or are you doing architecting? Are you mentoring developers? How do you deal with the product side? Are you like managing the project, or do you mind to kind of delve into a little bit more of what the kind of role would actually entail?
Yeah, sure. So on a day-to-day basis, I think as a co-founder, once you start to grow your startup and you have a few employees, your role kind of becomes to fix whatever thing that other people you have employed um, can't do themselves, or fill in the gaps so that your employees don't have to context switch between a bunch of different tasks. So in reality, today maybe I do, like, on some weeks I do no coding at all. On other weeks, 50% of my time is coding, but then I do legal, financial administration, things like paying out salaries to our employees, making sure we have money comes in and out in the company, investor relations together with my partner Malin, who's the CEO. And then when it comes to product, it's more that I'm responsible for the vision of the product, like the long term, and also I think as a CTO, um, your responsibility is to leverage tech in your business, right? So it can also be things like figuring out, okay, now we built a platform for the service that we're selling. Could we potentially white label this platform and sell it as a technology as well? And what kind of technological choices do we need to do in order to not paint ourselves into a corner so that we don't have the opportunity to do that in the future?
Your job sounds a lot like mine, where I'm kind of. Are you also the one who has to like call up people who owe you money and say, "Pay me"?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That sometimes happens.
Yeah, so I feel like maybe I should change my title to that one, and somebody else is CEO at this point. So that's interesting. Now, you jumped ahead to an important topic, right? We're going to be talking about two topics today, right? And you already mentioned, so we kind of started mentioning about done, but we're going to park that one to the side as we talked about, and we're going to talk about Flutter and Friends first, right? So Flutter and Friends, not Flutter Friends, but Flutter and Friends, is a Flutter conference located in Stockholm in September 3rd through 5th of this year, right?
Yes, exactly. So we're an event that starts on the 3rd, on a Sunday, with social events, and then we have a conference day on the 4th, and then on the 5th we have workshops. So just to start off a little bit with where I was coming from, like I was before Done, I was an iOS developer for 10 years, and I was very involved in the local iOS community here in Stockholm. And after a few years, we were talking about, hey, we should do an iOS conference in Stockholm as well. So we did that in 2018. That was before I co-founded Done. And then, of course, COVID and everything happened. And in 2019, when it was time for us to start our own company, I realized that actually we couldn't afford to do both native iOS and native Android in parallel, and we needed to have both from day one. And luckily, that coincided with Flutter just hitting 1.0 and stable. So we started off with that. And now we're organizing this conference, Flutter and Friends. So it's really a conference from the community. So apart from me, also Lucas spied on Twitter, who's one of the creators of the Flame game development package for Flutter, as well as Victor Lidholt, which runs ServerPod. We're doing this conference together. And for me, it's really like the culmination of attending many different kinds of conferences, big and small, throughout the years, and like picking out what I feel like are the best parts from each and every one of those conferences. And one of the things that we really want to highlight is the social aspect, which is why, hence the name Flutter with Friends and Friends. So when you come to a conference as a lone attendee, or if you're coming together with maybe a coworker, I think it's sometimes can be hard and daunting to enter a big room on conference day with a couple of hundred people you haven't talked to before, and to start making conversations, start getting to know people, and ultimately get some new connections and friends for you, both professionally and in your social life. And what we wanted to do with Flutter and Friends is to facilitate as many opportunities for you to make new friends as possible. So, for instance, on the Sunday, we have a social activities day. So during that day, you sign up for one of our social activities, which are done in smaller groups. So we do things like having a bike tour throughout Stockholm, which is a beautiful city. I can't wait for everyone to come and see, as well as different things, going to the fun fair, going bouldering, different kinds of fun activities. And then later we have Flutter pub quiz in the evening, and we have this thing called Dinner with Strangers. We also just sign up and you get assigned to a smaller group that you're going to have dinner with at a local Stockholm restaurant. So we do that before the main conference day so that you get to know a bunch of people from different groups, from different backgrounds, well before the big conference day. So when you show up in that big venue with 250 people, then you already know some people in the crowd, and you're going to have a much easier time to start conversating with people, and you're going to have a better opportunity to meet people and talk to them for a longer stretch than just in the small breaks.
Well, I love that idea. Basically, kind of like a pre-event icebreaker, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then after the conference day, we also have a workshop day, which I think is, as far as Flutter is concerned, I think we're the first conference doing it. So at the conference day, you're going to have the opportunity to take your own code and get help from, for instance, Mike Rydström, Material Mike. Get help with turning your app to Material 3. Learn ServerPod together with ServerPod's author Victor, etc. So it's really a way for like the community to also be able to teach each other, and not just like having a talk, but some kind of more interaction.
Okay, that's interesting. I like that you can get Victor there. Obviously, we all know Mike. I'm not sure if everybody else knows Mike in here, but I like that we can get Victor there, who is the creator of ServerPod, and he could actually teach you how to use what it is that he created. A lot of times these like external people will teach you tutorials, etc., but they don't really maybe understand everything. And then also sometimes people ask questions, and then you find out, oh, actually, there's something I could add into ServerPod. I'm talking about from Victor's side, or even from Mike's side.
Yeah, exactly. As you mentioned, it's great to have a big like community of educators that are on YouTube and do blogs, etc. But sometimes things get some small nuances gets lost in translation, and of course, the best way to learn something is to learn it directly from its creator. And I think also it's probably going to be a great way for Victor to get feedback himself from people that are going to use his framework for the first time.
Yeah, well, I know that it's always kind of tricky that you do want to get feedback, but at the same time, you want to get feedback with that you can action on to a certain extent, right? Because like, okay, oh, this sucks. It's like, well, I can't do much with that. Like, where does where does it suck? Or like, this is great. I love it. And then you're like, okay, well, what is there something that you don't like? Is there anything that's maybe could be better? No, it's perfect. Well, that's not. There must be something, right? And so maybe you do get these kind of things. Not to mention, I think a lot of frameworks and stuff they focus on getting the thing done, which of course which is important. But once you can do that thing, so let's say server pod, once server pod can really power you to do whatever you want for your Flutter app in the back end, the next step I think is also very important, but I'm not sure if it's really important in terms of getting this done or not. But the ease of bringing newcomers to use that framework, right? And so if you have the training with somebody who's got zero knowledge, and then you can see, oh, I can see why this is confusing. How can I make this easier? Maybe I can, like, if you type this wrong, then I get a nice help message that will make it clear, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, that's powerful for both sides. I think that's really a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. So yeah, we're starting out this year with this 3-day event, and hopefully in the future we can grow it even bigger. So we're selling tickets right now, and for the listeners of Flying High with Flutter, we also have a discount code called High20. So with the code High20, you can get a 20% discount on the ticket as well.
Okay, so high 20, yeah, awesome. I mean, if I was in Europe, I'd probably make my way over there. Sadly, everybody in Hong Kong is always forgotten for most of the programming world. It's not much conferences in Asia these days.
Yeah, but wasn't there a one in Singapore pretty soon or in this autumn?
There could be. I haven't heard of it. If you know about something or anybody who's listening knows about it, let me know if there's something happening in Singapore. I have a lot of they're called Asian miles, right? For flying. So I have a lot of Asian miles I could fly over there for pretty cheap. It's pretty close for me to fly over to Singapore. I can definitely check it out. The only thing about Singapore is, it's have you been to Singapore?
Yeah,
Super clean. It kind of freaks me out a little bit.
yeah, it is. I really like the combination of it being super clean, but then you also have these huge food markets with food stalls, like really cheap, excellent food.
Oh, I haven't seen that. I actually live in a local market over here, so I'm so used to seeing, half, like, take a whole pig and cut it in half, like, I guess you would call that long ways, like, on a push cart being pushed across with the hooves being dragged on the ground. So it's like, all right.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't know if I would trust that.
my I'm not even kidding you. Like my bedroom. Well, you gotta wash it, right? But my bedroom is actually right on top of a butcher shop. So I always hear chop, chop, chop. Well, I'm used to it now, but before I used to hear chop, chop, chop at 4 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, I can imagine. I've never seen something like that. To me, Singapore is quite built up, but I haven't traveled all around Singapore. But kind of getting back to the main topic, like I love your idea. In fact, I'm actually in the middle of putting on a potential conference in Hong Kong
Oh, that's awesome.
for something. Yeah, I'm not going to say too much because I feel I might jinx myself and it may not happen. But I'm working on it, and I kind of like your idea of that pre-party. I went to a conference in I want to say Ukraine in UK where there was something like a pre-party, but it was more for like um speakers and stuff, and they didn't really make it so clear that you should come. But this one sounds more, no, you really should come because it's going to make everything much easier, as opposed to this one was, no, you get to meet people before the conference so you could get like that one-to-one time. Because once you're in a conference, obviously you cannot, just, I'm going to say bug them, but you cannot spend as much time together. Plus, of course, it was at like a bar and stuff, so you had, you a little bit more relaxed. So yeah, depends on how you want to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been to conferences before that had these like pre-drinks the day before, and usually quite informal. But what we really wanted to do was to make it part of the actual agenda for the conference and split people up into smaller groups, so it's easier to make small talk and contact. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
Tickets are available for purchasing now, right?
Yep, tickets are available, and we have a great lineup of speakers as well. We have Felix Angelov talking about how they built for Shorebird. We have Vyacheslav, who's on the Dart compiler team. He's going to talk about like the Dart runtime. And Ankansha, Dominic, Darja, Scott Stoll, Lucas of Widget Book, and many more.
Speaking of Widget Book, I mean, they really kind of, I want to say, ran out swinging, but they really got a really good break. Like, they were mentioned in another conference, I think, or Google I/O, I think it was. And they got a pretty big boost.
Yeah, yeah, I believe so. I haven't actually used their product yet, but I really want to do that.
You basically got a lot of heavy hitters coming, so that's quite a big. Because there's, I mean, I've never heard of Flutter and Friends, but again, there's so many conferences. It's hard to keep track of in Flutter, right? I mean, we just finished, what was that one in Berlin? Fluttercon, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we're 2 months after Fluttercon. Hopefully, the desire for more is going to come soon enough, so people can get tickets to us as well. But yeah, Fluttercon was absolutely huge. Um, but what we're doing is, I think, slightly different. It's a bit more communal in the fact that it's smaller and so on. But I also saw that Widgetbook had a great after party after Fluttercon that seems to be very appreciated. But one of the main things also is that I feel like in general, online and in conference, you have this really tight community among speakers and like content creators who know each other through Twitter, through speaking at conferences. You usually have speakers dinners and so on, and it becomes like a really tight knit group. But for like the regular Flutter developer who just asks his boss for a ticket and comes to the conference, we wanted to give them that feeling of community as well, and make sure that everybody come out with new friends, so that it's not only this like really core tight knit group of people who see each other at every conference.
Yeah, now that you mentioned, I didn't even think about that part. I mean, for me, I think I usually make a couple of friends there, and then once you leave, you just kind of lose touch or whatever. Or you're trying to meet up again the next conference. But yeah, I see what you're saying, right? Basically, there's more bonding between the speakers than there is the people who actually attend, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm curious to see. This is the first time you guys have done this style.
Yeah, so we the Swift conference that I was organizing in 2018, we had the same kind of concept with the social day, but then we didn't have a workshop day afterwards. And from there, like we tried out this concept with the social activities and the pre-party, etc. And we got great feedback from attendees, and I felt that we had like a really great like community feeling at the conference. So it felt like it was a hit move. So that's why we wanted to continue with it, but for the Flutter community. Now that I'm no longer a native developer.
Yeah, that sounds pretty exciting. I mean, we talked quite a bit about that, and we have another topic to get to, and we're about halfway in. Is there any? Don't mean to kind of brush this topic and do a unsmooth transition, but is there anything else that we've missed about Flutter and Friends that we should let people know about before we transition back to about your experience with Flutter?
I think you can find most of it on our website, flutterfriends.dev, and you can follow our Twitter as well on at Flutter in Friends. Yeah, go there for the latest updates.
Now, coming back to you, right? You started this company called Done, which now is the word "done" also in Swedish, or is this just the English word "done" and that's it, and everybody knows that word?
Yeah, it's just the English word done, and that's it. So the funny thing is that the company I was coming from was called Doer, so went from doer to done. But it felt like it was a good fit for the type of service that we do. So we're this kind of managed service for hiring craftsmen.
Yeah. Well, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the. I mean, I know what it is, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I like to hear about kind of the before story, and then we kind of get into what you guys actually do and how you solve the problem, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, idea-wise, I think it started for me like way back when I was trying to do like some simple renovations with my kitchen. Nothing like not a complete renovation, but some small tweaks. And I found out how difficult it was, at least in Sweden, to find a great contractor. And many of them, they didn't want to take these kind of like smaller jobs. They only wanted to do big projects. And then once I had the job done, it took like 6 months for the invoice to come. And when the invoice came, it was all wrong. Like it said that there have been people working on a holiday, which I know for sure there wasn't. So I was figuring, there needs to be some kind of improvements in this home services area. But at the time, I was working at the other startup called Doer. But then, after a few years, actually, when I was organizing Swift and Fika, the Swift conference, one of our sponsors there was this company called Antler. So Antler is a venture capital fund, but it's also a program for entrepreneurs who want to start their own company, but don't have haven't developed the idea and don't have their co-founders yet. So basically, they take in applicants and try to do like a 50-50 split between people in tech and people in business. All right. So I joined this program, and so did my co-founder Malin. So we met there. So she had a background of running like business operations at different startups before, and I had the background of being a iOS developer and like a tech lead. So together we started looking at different ideas. This old idea that I had came into mind, and really, like I always when I think back of like digital services that have like profoundly affected my life for the better, I go back to the fact that a lot of them are marketplaces, like apps that connect people with each other, right? So like when Facebook started, it was revolutionary if you were backpacking, meeting new friends, and all of a sudden you could find each other on Facebook like that, and you can stay in touch. And services like Airbnb that may be able to, live at other people's places and explore new cultures. Services like Hostel World and Couchsurfing, and then Uber came along, which is also this marketplace service, right? You have taxi drivers, you have people who want to book a taxi. Now there was one app to have them both find each other. So I kind of knew that I wanted to do a marketplace. So we explored this market of home services, and at the time there was also this trend with using video calls. So there was this trend of using it in medicine, like apps where you can see a doctor over a video call. So we were contemplating the idea that usually when you have home contractors that you need to do a project for you, they need to come home to you, have a look around the house to be able to give you an estimate and a quote on what it's going to cost. And thereafter, you can actually book the service. So we were toying with the idea, what if we could replace these home visits with video calls? You have a video call, you can show your electrician, this is what I need help with, these are my wall sockets, etc. And then we could make the process much more effective both for the consumer and for the craftsmen who don't need to drive around town all day. Usually they do it once they finished all other work they have, so they do it in the evenings, and this way we save them time. Uh, so of course, when we were looking at this service, like we knew that we needed to be mobile, we needed to have an app, and since it was going to have video calls, we needed to have both iOS and Android at the same time, because most of our customer base in Stockholm were iOS users, but most of the craftsmen were like 50-50 of the craftsmen were using Android. So we knew right from the bat that we needed to have both platforms at launch. And that's kind of how we found Flutter.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. Um, but I mean, when you start working with Flutter, what was Flutter at the time? Was it only for mobile devices? Because when I joined, it was basically mobile only.
Yeah, exactly. So it was mobile only. And our first app was mobile only. And then when Flutter Web came into beta, we tried out immediately, because at that point, we had been growing for a while. So we had like the typical craftsmen who worked with us were like sole proprietors. They were working for themselves. They were the only employees in the company. But some companies had a few more employees, and some of them had people coordinating the work and sat at an office. And they had told us, I don't want to sit and work with a mobile phone. I do all my work on a laptop. So before Flutter Web, we of course had the other alternative of creating an entire web app, but that would mean that we need to hire web developers or take resources from our mobile app team for them to start developing this second code base. And of course, then you suddenly have two code bases. So every time you create a new feature, there's always going to be one code base that gets created faster than the other for that feature, because there might be some, technical depth backlog items that need to be clearing first on one platform, but not the other. So you always need to like wait the two platforms out. And we really wanted to avoid that as much as possible. So when Flutter Web was announced in beta, we tried it out. And at first, in the beta, like we saw that there was potential. We had an intern who created a prototype in a couple of weeks, and we saw that we were 90% there, but there were some still missing pieces. And then after holding off the project for a few months, and when the Flutter Web went stable, we tried it out again and saw that it met our needs perfectly.
That's interesting though. But I mean, it must not be a straightforward um, port. I mean, it's just like okay, target web and done, right? There must be some tweaking involved. No.
For our first web version, we targeted actually desktop only, so we didn't target mobile web. So what we did was to make the layout flexible, and we added like uh, we made our tab bar like vertical instead of being at the bottom, and we added like a pane view, so you had like your main navigation, and then you had a second pane with the details of whatever you clicked at in the navigation pane, things like that. But those are only UI tweaks. At first, we didn't have our video call feature on the web. We only had it on mobile, but later we added that as well. So it was really, I think, like the powerful thing with Flutter is that if you're only in Dartland and Flutterland, everything works beautifully, whatever device you're on. It just works, and we never had any device-specific bugs. It's only the plugins that are going to be the headache. So in our case, like we were using Firebase, and there's still no pure Dart implementation of Firestore and all the different other Firebase services. So this meant that we needed to wait for a web plugin for Firebase as well. But once that was up, and of course it had a few kinks in the beginning, then things went on pretty smoothly. There was some, I think, with file management, there was also some problems because we had support for file uploads, and there was this thing we need to use this package called Xfile, and have a lot of if statements depending on if we were on web or targeting native. But other than that, it was a fairly smooth process.
Now, the other thing that I remember, right, you're saying that you targeted desktop support for or desktop view for web, right? Now, one of the things that's still not working unless something changed is the hot code reload for web, right? Now, how did you manage to get working with that? Like what I usually see, at least over here, what we usually do is we work with we actually we had like a web only project, and then we just had it target Mac because we're all using Macs, and then we would work everything with Mac, and then we would just kind of do it like a one time play around with web. Did you do the same thing?
Yeah, so we've been toying a bit with that, but we actually haven't done that all out. It's been like on our backlog for a while to add the Mac target, but so you don't have hot code reload, but you have hot restart, right? So hot restart, it works fairly well. I mean, you need to refresh your browser, and you might lose some state. But for us, since basically all of our state is in the cloud at all times with the Firestore, we didn't have that much issues developing for Flutter Web, but it was a bit slower than it was developing for the mobile platforms for sure.
Okay, so you're still developing using just the web, right? Okay, I can see how that works. I'm always kind of curious about how do you structure your code base, right? Because you have obviously mobile app, which is pretty clear to a certain extent, right? There's no like we don't really have the phablet issue necessarily as we used to like a long time ago. Um, how do you like manage your code so that the UI draws properly, and how do you like keep kind of sane between desktop, web, and uh, mobile native? And I'm guessing now you also have mobile web working, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we added mobile web just a few months ago, actually, on request of our some of our customers. So the thing is also with our service, we started out with selling our service directly to consumers, and then we marketed it as like this is the new way, to shop for home services. You download this app; it's amazing. And with that, we had these like early adopter customers who were willing to do that. But as we've grown, we're now also our service has also become a kind of an intermediary. So we work with retailers who sell products that need some kind of installation. So the biggest thing for us right now is EV chargers for cars. So we have this website that sells car chargers. They sell it with installation, and then we take over for the actual installation. So then we have our network with electricians all over Sweden, and so now these customers aren't necessarily ours from the start, and some of them were coming to us and saying like, "Hey, I don't want to download an app. I just want to get my car charger installed." And that's when we started using Flutter Web for mobile as well. And really, that was just like less than a week worth of time, just flipping a switch, making sure that some things weren't working incorrectly. And that was pretty much it. So I think Flutter Web it's been quite easy for us to work with. And when it comes to this, like how to make sure that we lay out differently on different devices, those have we've used quite simple widgets, quite high up in our widget hierarchy, which just queries the media query, look at the screen width. So that way we get responsive layout on web. You can take a desktop web browser window and resize it, and it becomes a mobile layout. And really, we've tried to keep as much as the layout the same between mobile and desktop, and just that on desktop, for instance, we have this like dual pane, this navigation detail pattern. That's pretty much it. And I think that's been working out great for us because when you're a small startup, we're a small development team of 3 developers that are working across the Flutter app, but also the backend, and we have an internal back office system uh, as a web app. Then you really need to like optimize for efficiency, not having to change in multiple places in the code base or multiple code bases when you need to do one minor change. So, for instance, also on our marketing website where you book your services, before that was a web app in React, and now with the success of using Flutter Web on mobile as well, we're looking at spawning out a separate app that can work as our booking flow on our website. So to kind of coordinate all of this, we use Melos, which is this great tool for orchestrating apps and packages and sharing like internal packages between apps. So we have a structure where we have like all our domain models in one package, and then all the UI in one package. What's really nice about that is that then in your UI widget, you can't access the model. So you follow this unidirectional data flow. So you know that your widgets aren't doing any funny stuff. And then we can also have multiple app targets. So we have one app target that goes for the Flutter mobile and web. And then we also have an internal app that we use specifically to test out our calling feature so that our in-house staff can use that app to call users inside of our platform from a separate app without being in like the customer or craftsman app that we have.
Now, are they also using the in-app calling to call them, or are they calling like traditional way?
Yeah, exactly. So they also use the in-app calling. So after the COVID years, I think many have been experiencing like the pain of really bad WebRTC calling solutions that are used by health agencies and stuff like that, where both of you have to go to the same URL at the same time, and things like that. And we really wanted to avoid that and make the calls like as much as of a true native experience as possible. So we have our own plugin out there called Flutter CallKit, which integrates with CallKit on iOS and connection service on Android to manage the calls, so that when a user calls somebody in our app, for the receiver, it shows up as a real call. So your phone starts ringing no matter what you do with it, and it covers the whole screen. It says, like this electrician is calling you from the Done app. And also you have you also for free get background calls that way, so that craftsmen or customers can look things up while they're having the video call and so on.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. I do remember it, like I think originally Skype was using this many years ago, and of course I'm sure they're probably still using it. So that's actually pretty easy to use. You're saying you're using a package for that, or do you actually have to write that package yourself?
Yeah, so we wrote that package called Flutter Call Keep. We also use another package called Flutter Web RTC to handle the actual streams. And now we also use that in conjunction with Agora, which is this managed service for WebRTC, which has been working great. Like we used to have some quite a lot of connection issues when we were running our own Web RTC servers. But with Agora, things have been working super good. But with Agora out of the box, you only get this like in-app experience where both parties need to enter the same screen at the same time. And then we added this layer with the package that we wrote, Flutter CallKit, to integrate with the OS services on iOS and Android, so that you get like a true call notification. So that, for instance, if you're already in another call and somebody calls you from the down app, it shows up and you can park it and things like that. So it's basically the same kind of experience as if you get like Facebook Messenger, or if you call with WhatsApp or Skype, as you mentioned as well.
Oh yeah, that's right. WhatsApp does have that. I totally forgot. You know, the most annoying thing about WhatsApp calls, at least, so I have a Apple Watch. You can see it's the Ultra one. Usually my phone's in my pocket. I usually have it on vibrate because I'm always going meeting to meeting, or I'm listening to podcast, wherever I don't want to listen. I don't even know what the heck my ringtone sounds like. And when people call me through WhatsApp, it always vibrates my phone. And sometimes if it's not near me, like it's on my desk, or if it's in my pocket, it's not against my leg, I don't feel the vibration. And I don't get any notification on my watch. So I'm not sure if you have the same issue or not. I'm curious if that's something that uh, is for all apps, or just WhatsApp doesn't integrate properly, or what.
Oh, that's a great question. It was a really long time I tried out using the watch, so I can't remember if it works well or not.
Yeah, the call doesn't even show up on my watch at all. It's just like nothing. So then people call me, and then they keep calling me, and then finally they call me on my real, how's it called, the real phone number. And then I see, oh, hey, I keep calling you. Where are you? What do you mean? I'm here where we said to meet. Yeah, but I called you like 10 times. I'm like, really? Oh, what's all these missed calls on WhatsApp? What's going on? So yeah, yeah. If it's a problem, like if it's because like it doesn't integrate like CallKit or whatever, then I would be a little bit upset with Apple, because that's yeah, because it's very common to put your phone on the table, and then like, listening to music, or who the heck knows what. It doesn't really matter, right? You have this watch that they're supposed to be selling you on that you should be using, but it's not telling me when I get phone calls through WhatsApp, at least. Drives me crazy. Um, yeah, maybe you better. I think did I put a worry onto you now?
No, I think it's good. I do remember. I think I have a slight remembrance that it does work, but I need to double check because so long time ago. Nowadays, like what's mostly on our agenda is to like fix a lot of internal financial administration and like work with our backend systems to make sure like invoices go in and out correctly, and the people get paid on time and stuff like that.
Especially you get paid on time.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna bring that into the app as well, but those are kind of problems that come once you start scaling a bit.
Well, the good thing is, I think, and let me know if I'm wrong, but I think you're past that. So I think you're past the point of, is this a valid idea, right? You've validated it. It sounds like, with real customers coming at you, and you have found also. I don't know if it's a how much it is, but you mentioned somewhat of a, what I would call, a side business, right? Because you wanted to get the home improvement, home repairs, but then you have this kind of second thing which is related, which is about getting, like you said, EV chargers, and also other things from when you buy them, getting installed to people's place. Could be home, could be office, who knows what, right? That was never on your horizon, I think, right? Initially.
Yeah, exactly. No, it wasn't, and actually now that area has become our biggest business. And I think it's interesting. Really, like you hear about companies and entrepreneurs who have to pivot a lot, right? You start out with one business idea and then you pivot to something else because the original idea didn't work. And I think that's kind of always going to be part of the process, because once you're on the market and you start getting customers, you start getting to know your competitors better, you know the market better, then you're going to find opportunities. And I think that's something that's really important as a CTO, to plan your product to be able to take opportunities when they come. So with that said, Flutter, that's why Flutter was such a great choice for us. For instance, that we knew that we needed to start out on mobile, but then as web came along, now we could use it for web as well. And now we're also looking at like how could we even take our entire platform and sell it to someone in across the globe, where we won't expand with our service because it's too far away from us and we don't know the market, but maybe somebody else can take the platform that we have, which enables and facilitates communication and facilitates like distribution and planning of these jobs and all the financial stuff, and use it for something else that we didn't think about.
What I was trying to say is that it sounds like you solve basically all the technical issues that you were looking to solve. You have it working on web, which is basically the missing platform. I'm guessing, I mean, are you looking to try to put this as also to a desktop app, or maybe it's not really required because you have mobile and you have web, right, which works on desktop and mobile.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think what's really cool is that once you target web, you also so Flutter generates PWA manifest for you. So if you're running Chrome, you have like a one-click button to install your app as a PWA app. So then it shows up, like among your other apps on your computer. You can, command tab to it. You get push notifications, all of that. So I think the tricky thing about Flutter Desktop is that if you need plugins, now you have more platforms to target for those plugins. So, for instance, it took quite a while before there was before the Flutter Fire project had come to desktop. And of course, desktop is not just one platform, but then you need a Flutter Fire for Mac OS, one for Windows, one for Linux. But all of these platforms do still run web. So if you want to target those users, you can still do that through web. And of course, that it then depends what kind of app that you have. In our case, our app, it facilitates a service, but people don't pay for the app. People pay for the service. So I think it would be completely differently if you were building a productivity app or like an email client or something like that, something like Superlist. Then you need to target the true native platforms to get that really high fidelity and that last ounce of performance. But in our case, like since our service takes something that used to take a week to take like a day, then if it's refreshing a few milliseconds slower, it's not a big deal in the bigger scope of things.
Yeah, you made a really good point. It's too bad. I don't think PWAs actually work on desktop, do they?
Oh yeah, they do. With on Mac OS at least they do. Um, yeah, and but what's also interesting is that if you have an M chip Mac, you can also run native iOS apps.
Yeah, I remember that. I haven't tried it. I can imagine how weird that would be. So was it just pick up your laptop and start shaking if you want to shake to undo? I don't think that's supported, but yeah, I have to try that someday. I totally forgot about that. The other thing I'm also interested in and kind of curious about, like, I am attracted to that idea. Do you remember like those? I forgot what the names are called, where it's like you can download a quick version of the app where it's like very very slim. Do you support that? Are you looking to actually end up supporting that?
Yeah, so I think that was kind of a idea that was good on paper, but um, I think both Apple and Google, they are both competing all the time to release new APIs, release new features, and at some point, um, as an app developer, like you just can't keep up with implementing all of the features, right? And I think that's and then you need to do a cost benefit analysis. I think that's kind of what happened with these app snippets, because I haven't seen them around anywhere. Like there are restaurants and shops that have apps, and this functionality was, supposedly for those kind of places. Like you go to the movies or something, and instead of downloading the entire big bulky app for that cinema, you should be able to just scan a special code, and then you have the in-app experience as if it was on the web. And I've never seen that. So I think like the cost benefit analysis kind of like didn't make sense there, because perhaps web was good enough, and also like mobile speeds have improved a lot. So that was also one of the big reasons for why we were betting on video calls, because in 2019 we had 4G, but 5G was right around the horizon. And already then, like we could start noticing amongst the users that most of our users had better cellular connection than they had Wi-Fi, because with at-home Wi-Fi, it depends really a lot on your configuration. Depends where your router is, what brand, if there's additional traffic coming from other tenants in the same house. But cellular just always works. And with 5G, I would reckon that most people have a better connection on their mobile than they have at Wi-Fi. And once you have that, like downloading a 100 megabyte app, it's not a big deal. But then, of course, this is like in developed markets, and in other markets where internet connectivity is slower, maybe it makes sense there. But like from Apple's point of view, you don't have much iOS penetration, and I think Android users would probably still just use the web rather than because if you have with the web, you can use just a regular QR code. You don't need to do something like fancy where the device senses that this link goes to like a special limited app link, rather than going to the web browser or going to the store, and it just becomes more complicated.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I guess for me, I can definitely see the value in that. And I mean, it kind of depends, right? Because sometimes you use something one off, you would like to have that simple experience. And if you don't have web people on your team or you don't have Flutter, then maybe that's more attractive to you. Like, I think they gave the example of like renting skis or something. Or to me, what's coming to my mind is like if you take the train, like we often have a train that goes from the suburbs to downtowns of the city. If you go downtown maybe like once a year, does it really make sense for you to download the app? Like, let's just say that that's their only method. They don't have physical keys or something, physical tickets. They have everything on like maybe that makes sense. And then it's like, well, I have to work downtown, so then I'm the app works great. Now I want to download the full experience. Like something like that definitely makes sense. But I see your point. It's like, well, what's the cost benefit analysis of it? How big is the app really going to be? I mean, to me, it's like you want to be able to, I don't know, like nowadays you have to convince somebody to download your app, right? As opposed to what it was used before when iPhone first came out. It was there's an app for that, and now it's you go to a restaurant and say, "Oh, download our app," and it's like, I don't want to do that. I don't know what you feel like, but for me, it's like, I don't want to do that. And it's also annoying because my phone's still in US store and some apps are not available to me because my Apple account's still in US and I'm in Hong Kong. So the app may not even be available to me. So then I'm totally screwed. And that's where the web browser would work.
Exactly, and I think the thing is that in the end, the reality is that you always need to fall back on the web, because of people have different devices, people have old devices, people don't want to download an app. You always need to be able to provide a web interface if you're selling like a commercial service that targets the broad mass, because you're gonna have grandmas and grandpas who are 70 plus, who like, I don't, we had some customers who like, I don't have an app phone, you know?
No, they have a flip or something?
Yeah, exactly. In that case, like, it doesn't make sense for them to like ask their son or daughter to like download an app for them, right? Like in those type of circumstances, like the web always works. You just give it a URL, and you can access it whatever device you're on. And because of since it becomes like the least common denominator, you always need to have that. And then the cost benefit analysis becomes weaker, because if you already have the web and you already have the native app, okay, how much extra benefit do you get in order to, if you're going to build this special isolate? Because that takes also quite a lot of effort, and it requires a lot of your code base, because it requires that your code base is very modular, so that you can actually strip away all of the other things, and you can ship a binary and a resource bundle which only contains the images and the fonts and the code that's needed for this specific use case. Um, and in some cases, that might then translate to, oh, we need to refactor our entire app in order to just have the possibility of building this use case. And with Flutter, it becomes even more or even less convincing, because with Flutter you still need to ship the entire Flutter binary. So I think it's going to be really hard to come down in binary size.
Well, what about when you have people that say, like you said, have a feature phone? I'm sure people at home have no idea what the heck a feature phone is. It's the younger audience. You and I are a little bit older. You know what I'm talking about. So basically, a non iPhone or Apple, not even a Windows, but like if you have, and then you have like a desktop with no webcam, no microphone. How do they experience done then?
Yeah, so apart from video calls, we also have an in-app chat. But also, in special cases, we just need to like leave everything digital behind. If there's a customer that has ordered a service, they paid for the service. The important thing is to provide the service for the customer and make the customer happy. So in those cases, we might do things in our back office, because like in our app, both the craftsman or installer and the customer uses it. So the craftsman still like uses our app to manage that project, and to make notes for themselves, etc. Whilst maybe the customer never even sees the app. They just they might get like a regular phone call or an SMS saying like, "Hey, your installer is coming this date at this time." So that's something like, in a startup you need to be very very flexible in those kind of ways. And of course, if you're making the next like Twitter or Instagram, that it's a whole different story, because then your app is your product. It is what you're selling. And then you can also be niched with your market. I mean, Instagram only launched on iOS. It was only on iOS for, I think, a full year before it came to Android. Uh, of course, you're going to limit yourself a bit then. But when you're selling a different kind of service, I mean, if you are selling train tickets and you can't download an app, like you're going to become really frustrated with a train company. You're just going to say, hey, I just want to get my ticket. I don't care about your app. So it's really important to be able to think about like what kind of customers you will actually be getting, and think about those edge cases as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, well, I mean, I think we covered quite a bit about done. Is there anything else that we missed about it? I mean, we went deep into the product. We talk about what it actually does, the new line of business, your pivot, a slight pivot, right?
Yeah, slight. Might become a bigger pivot later if we start selling the platform.
I mean, is there anything else that we missed?
Yeah, well, I was thinking maybe with Flutter Web, when we started out, like just like Navigator 1.0, 2.0 era. With Navigator 1.0, that's all history now. But
Is that a pun?
N- it very well could be. But yeah, as you probably know as well, like the URLs you got on web were pretty terrible. Like it wasn't built for handling uh, web URLs as web users were used to. So that's also why we didn't launch like a customer version of our web app until Navigator 2.0 showed out, and we could do things with Go Router. We also haven't yet transitioned to Canvas Kit. We're still using the HTML renderer, and the biggest problem that's stopping us. And I'd be really curious to hear from the Flutter team on this. Like, there's an open issue about it, but that's the rendering of system native
Mm.
emojis. So in for our use case, like chat is probably the most important feature in our app. People chat, the craftsman and customer all the time. And if you're running an iOS device, you need to have iOS emojis. Otherwise, your app is not going to be taken seriously, even if it's a web app. Same thing if you're running, if you're running a Mac and you use Flutter Web on your Mac, you need to have Apple style emojis. And right now, I believe that I might be wrong on this, but I believe that in Canvas Kit, you don't have access to the system fonts. And that's a problem. So you need to ship your own fonts. But of course, you can't ship Apple's emoji font because it has a license restriction. You can only access it through the OS and the native browser APIs. So when you run Flutter Web with the Canvas Kit renderer, you right now have two options. So either you don't show emojis at all, or you use a third-party emoji font, which gonna, of course, break how things look like on the different platforms. And of course, some apps run their own emojis, like Facebook Messenger, for instance. But like I think you need to be really careful of things like that, because we're not at a level where people use our app all the time. We can't, if we would just throw in a random emoji library, uh, I think users would complain about it, and we don't have the resources to kind of like design our entire own emoji library like Facebook has done for Messenger, with kind of which integrates well with the rest of their design, etc. So what's interesting is that there are other web apps that do render emojis, like Figma, for instance, and I've looked at in the web inspector while running Figma, and it seems to me like they are running most of the navigation panes. They are running HTML, and they render the emojis perfectly fine. But all the content in the middle, like the actual design, that's running on the canvas, and they are still able to render the emojis. So I wonder if they use some kind of trick where they might, off-screen render the text as an HTML element, convert that into pixels, and then put it back on the canvas or something like that. So there is, as I mentioned, an ongoing issue in the Flutter repo about this. But I wonder if that might be like a trick that could be used. It would be interesting to follow what's going to happen with that. But for us, that's like the last thing that stops us from switching over to Canvas Kit.
Okay, I wasn't aware of this. Maybe because I never really focus on emojis too much, and we have one Flutter Web app that I can think of, and that's for conducting clinical trials. So I don't see a lot of doctors and patients sending. I mean, maybe how are you feeling today? Frowny face. I mean, it's possible, but it's never come up. So that's interesting. Okay. I didn't know this was an issue, but that definitely makes sense, and that rings true to me, about the font issue, right? That I don't know about the distributing part, but for sure I know about, the fonts and, yeah, the Apple stuff. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm curious how they can solve that. I guess you'd have to embed a special widget and say, "Okay, this stuff is HTML," or something. I don't know. Did they talk about any kind of possible they didn't talk about any kind of possible solutions in that issue?
Not last time I checked, but now of course there's been some weeks of vacation and other stuff for me, so I haven't caught up. But yeah, I guess what they could do is like if there is a special widget and then in turn that used the JS plugin, and then in JavaScript you would in some way like off-screen render get the pixels back. But yeah, it's going to be cool to see once they find out a solution to check out how they did it.
It's interesting to hear your use case for it and how you didn't really get into Flutter Web until, yeah, you saw it there, you parked it till it was stable, tried out when stable, seems to fit for everything. One small issue to use the new renderer, but hopefully that'll get solved sometime soon. It sounds like Flutter really helped your business a lot, right? And I'm guessing there's probably no regrets. And what's kind of next on the horizon? We were kind of talking a little bit about that before. Like you solved all your technical issues, it's except for this one, the emoji one, but at least it works now.
Yeah, and actually for us, like the HTML renderer, it works fine. Like we're not an animations heavy app or anything like that, so we don't need all the juice of the Canvas kit render that I'm assuming apps like Rive need. But next up for us, it's right now we're only in Sweden, so we're probably going to expand to more markets soon. Um, in terms of the app, we've been toying around with like adding AR, adding AI as well, like doing stuff like perhaps using Palm 2, Google's natural language model to like summarize chats, and also we're looking at transcribing video calls and then summarizing them so that we can say like, okay, who is it, the customer who's waiting for the craftsman for a reply, or is it the craftsman who's waiting for the customer to get their package home delivered, and things like that, to kind of add some like operational intelligence that helps out our team to make sure that things are going smoothly, and like can detect if there's like a change of mood in the chat, that okay, now this is starting to sound hostile, someone should look into it, things like that.
Oh, hostile chat with the repairman. That does not sound good.
Yeah, but sometimes people start arguing about things. I didn't show up yesterday. Oh, I was sick. Things like that, and then we need to get a hold. Maybe give the customer a discount. Maybe just talk to them. Or making sure that the partners that we do have, the craftsmen, that they are good at their jobs and good in communication, and it's really hard to do that at scale.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're gonna have some bad apples, but I think what I try to think about other people, and sometimes I think it's just about setting expectations, right? Like, oh, you said you're gonna show up. Maybe something wasn't communicated or wasn't clear what's going on. So stuff happens, right? And then people get all upset because they feel, not happy, right? I loved hearing your insight about how Flutter really worked out for your business and how Flutter Web also worked out well, and you've been super happy with it other than that one small issue with the emoji, and hopefully, again, that one gets fixed because that I'm sure you're not the only one. In fact, I was just looking up over here, and it seems like a lot of people are also complaining about that. So yeah, that's a really big issue, I would say. It's a relatively big issue.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a huge issue for us. We can still run with the HTML renderer. But yeah, it was super nice talking to you, Alan. And you can also find me on Twitter and at Mr. Alek. And remember to check out Flutter and Friends in September. Yeah, Super awesome talking to you.
And discount code is high 20, right? HIGH, and then number two, number zero.
Yes, high 20.
Cool. Thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully have you again on soon.
Thank you too, Alan.